Among the most feared lions that ever ruled the wildlands of Africa, one stood out for his fury and notoriety. Mr. T. The Mapogo coalition, called the Blood Brothers of Sabi Sands, left their mark on wild history with their strategic brutality and absolute dominance. And among them, there was one that stood out for his aggression and unpredictability. His extreme ferocity earned him a dark nickname, Satan. Mr. T knew no mercy. When he had to, he even killed his own nephews, his brother's sons. But within this ruthless nature there was an unbreakable bond, his fierce alliance with Kinky Tail, his best friend and battle partner. When the jungle demanded blood, Mr. T was always on the front lines, and Kinky Tail never hesitated to fight by his side. But even the most powerful can't escape the trials of fate, and relentless challenges awaited the two. Born between 2001 and 2002, in the legendary Sparta Pride, Mr. T and his brothers faced the wild reality from an early age. In 2006, when they were strong enough, they stopped being nomads and started conquering territory. And there were no negotiations. Any lion that crossed their path was mercilessly eliminated, including cubs, considered a threat to the Mapogo's dominance. This was the rule of absolute dominance, and Mr. T followed this code without remorse. With his group of 6 brothers, including Makulu, Kinky Tail, Dreadlocks, Rasta, and Pretty Boy, the Mapogo coalition changed the landscape of Sabi Sands in a few months. Their advance was so devastating that in a short time, more than half of the reserve was under their control. No other lion coalition had caused such an impact, and their reign seemed unquestionable. But even among deadly brothers, power comes at a price. In 2008, tensions began to rise within the coalition. Mr. T, with his unpredictable temper, began to clash with Makulu, the natural leader of the group. The unbreakable union of the Mapogo began to show cracks, and internal conflicts became frequent. What happens when an empire becomes too strong? It was at this moment that Mr. T made a decision that would change everything. And what happened next would transform not only his destiny, but would forever mark the history of lions in the African jungle. The African jungle doesn't forgive the weak. In the heart of Sabi Sands, a new force was emerging among the predators, shaped by instinct, by struggle, and by the fire of survival. In the early 2000s, a coalition was born, 6 lion brothers, raised in the ruthless Sparta Pride. Among them, one stood out not only for his size, but for his unparalleled ferocity. Mr. T. Still young, he didn't know that his destiny would be written in blood and dominance. Time passed, and the 6 brothers became a war machine, an army that would forever change the rules of animal conflict. In 2006, this alliance was already feared. The name Mapogo Coalition echoed like a curse among those who dared to dispute territory. Wandering lions who previously had chances to settle now encountered an impenetrable barrier. The Mapogo not only hunted together but established a ruthless dominance, eliminating rivals before they posed a danger. Mr. T emerged as one of the most brutal, the one who didn't hesitate. The secret of their power? Unity and strategy. While solitary lions lived at the mercy of chance, the Mapogo applied a new logic of survival: absolute conquest. They not only expanded their domains but exterminated anyone who dared to challenge their authority. Each battle won wasn't just a territorial victory, it was a message. Every roar at night carried a clear message: this territory has an owner, and whoever challenges will pay with their life. And Mr. T? He didn't just participate, he led the killing. But within the coalition itself, the balance was beginning to be tested. Leadership always has a price, and the greatest risk comes from within. Mr. T, with his wild nature, didn't accept being one among equals. He wanted more. And among the brothers themselves, the first signs of friction began to emerge. Small disputes during hunts, challenging stares during the night watches. What seemed like an unbreakable alliance now revealed invisible cracks. Amidst the chaos, he honed his brutality. Mr. T was no longer just a ruthless leader, he was a symbol of absolute dominance. Anyone who got in his way suffered the consequences. He wasn't content with small victories. His goal was clear: to reign unchallenged. But fate doesn't forgive even the most powerful, and on the horizon a storm was brewing. The first signs of what was to come showed themselves in 2008. A crack in the coalition, a decisive moment that would forever divide the Mapogo. Not all would survive what was coming. Being a leader in the wild doesn't just mean conquering territory, but holding on to it at all costs. Mr. T understood this better than any other lion. For him, there was no room for weakness. He didn't just confront rivals, he eliminated them. Every confrontation wasn't just a battle, It was a warning. There is no mercy in the jungle. His predatory instinct made him act without hesitation, ensuring his reign was marked by fear and blood. But Mr. T didn't stop at killing adult rivals. His dominance was so absolute that even cubs paid the price. In his brutal logic, leaving other males' offspring alive was a direct threat to his reign. If they weren't his own cubs, then they were potential enemies, and he dealt with it the only way he knew how, with extreme violence. Without hesitation, without regret. He was the embodiment of savagery, and his reputation only grew. The height of his brutality came when his actions shocked even his own brothers from the Mapogo coalition. It wasn't enough to eliminate rivals, he also turned against the blood of his own coalition. In a merciless decision, Mr. T murdered his own brother's cubs to ensure that only his lineage would continue. This was the moment his reputation surpassed that of any other lion. He wasn't just a leader, he was a tyrant. The fear he spread was absolute. Whenever a roar echoed under the African moon, the other lions knew it could be the last sound they'd hear. No matter the size of the threat, Mr. T faced anyone who dared to challenge him. His name became a legend, but also a warning. Challenge this lion and you won't live to tell the tale. Even the humans who followed the Mapogo were shocked by his brutality. But nothing in the jungle remains unchallenged forever. As time passed, the first signs of division within the coalition began to emerge. Mr. T no longer saw his brothers as unquestionable allies, and this paranoia only grew. Every look, every dispute over a female or over meat seemed to hide a challenge to his authority. Within the coalition, the balance began to crumble. And then, in 2008, came the moment that would change everything. A division formed among the Mapogo, and Mr. T, along with Kinky Tail, would make a decision that would seal their fate. In the African jungle, alliances are the key to survival, but when power comes into play, even the strongest bonds can break. In 2008, the Mapogo coalition, once a united force, began to fragment. The tension among the brothers grew, and the split finally happened. Mr. T and Kinky Tail made a drastic decision. They left the group and went their own way, taking control of the eastern portion of the territory. Now, they were no longer part of a dominant coalition. They were a new, independent force, ready to face whatever came their way. Separated from their former brothers, Mr. T and Kinky Tail had a gigantic challenge. Now just two lions needed to defend a vast territory, hunt and face rivals lurking in the darkness. But that didn't mean they were at a disadvantage. If there was one thing that defined Mr. T, it was his unmatched brutality. He didn't see obstacles, only opportunities to further consolidate his dominance. And any lion that dared to enter his lands would face a fierce battle. The problem is, in the world of predators, being outnumbered can be fatal. Rival coalitions were starting to notice the division, and rumors were spreading. Mr. T and Kinky Tail were powerful lions but isolated. The territory they had taken was under constant threat, and every day was a new battle for survival. The brothers still maintained their bloodthirsty reputation, but the jungle tested their resilience every moment. Even so, Mr. T didn't back down. 6 lions had ruled before, now only 2 commanded an entire territory, and he refused to accept any form of weakness. He and Kinky Tail hunted together, fought together, and eliminated any trace of opposition. They were an army of 2, and as long as they were alive, no one would take them down. But the price of this lifestyle was high, and the enemies kept growing. Their reign was marked by brutal victories but also by constant wear and tear. Every confrontation left its mark, every fight drained their energy, and that's when a shadow appeared on the horizon. A new threat, younger, more numerous, and as merciless as the Mapogo themselves, was advancing towards them. What would come next wasn't just another fight, it was a war that would decide the fate of Mr. T and Kinky Tail. And in the year 2010, this war finally began. A new coalition entered the scene, and their name would soon become as feared as that of the Mapogo, the Majingalane. In the wild, every battle defines the future of a territory. And in 2010, the empire of Mr. T and Kinky Tail would face its greatest challenge. 4 shadows moved in the darkness, silent, watching every step of the 2 Mapogo. They weren't mere intruders. They were the Majingalane, a new coalition of 5 males who hunted together, waiting for the right moment to strike. Young, strong, and strategically organized, they represented the threat that could change everything. The first encounter was brutal. Kinky Tail and Mr. T noticed the invasion and acted fast. Caught by surprise, the Majingulan were forced to fight. But the Mapogo weren't just any enemy, they were war machines. Kinky Tail, with his impressive strength, attacked fiercely, and managed to take down one of the invaders. Together, the brothers pounced on him, and in just a few minutes, one of the Majingalani was dead. The entire jungle heard their roars of victory. But that was just the beginning. Instead of retreating, the 4 surviving Majingilan coldly analyzed the situation. They wouldn't fight in the chaotic style of the Mapogo, they would use strategy. The next day, Mr. T and Kinky Tail had no idea they were already surrounded. The Majingalani didn't just want to win, they wanted to end the Mapogo era once and for all. The answer came quickly. When Kinky Tail momentarily wandered away, the 4 Majingalane launched a surprise attack. The fight was desperate. Alone against 4, Kinky Tail used all his strength, roaring and biting with everything he had. But it was impossible to win. He was overpowered, dragged, and brutally wounded. Mr. T, hearing the sounds of battle, ran to help his brother. But when he arrived, it was too late. The Majingalani didn't just kill Kinky Tail. They sent a message. His body was mutilated, crushed, as a warning to anyone who would challenge the new kings. The reign of the Mapogo was officially under attack. And Mr. T, now alone, saw his own story change forever. But if anyone thought he would accept this without a fight, they were wrong. Kinky Tail's death wasn't the end for Mr. T, it was fuel for his vengeance, and he would do anything to make the Majingalani pay for what they did. The African jungle shows no mercy, survival is cruel, and Mr. T had just learned that the hard way. His brother, Kinky Tail, was dead, not in a fair fight but in a cruel trap. The Majingalani weren't ordinary predators. They were brutal strategists, hunters who attacked in groups, giving their enemy no chance. When Mr. T found his brother's body, rage burned in his chest like never before. He hadn't just lost his battle companion, he'd lost a part of himself. But there was no time for grief. Mr. T knew the Majingalani wouldn't stop there. They had already proven their strength, and now they wanted the whole territory. Alone, he couldn't face them directly. But run? That wasn't an option. He wasn't just any lion, he was Mr. T, one of the Mapogo, a legendary warrior who wouldn't accept defeat. If the Majingalani wanted the territory, they would have to fight for every inch of it. Kinky Tail's death echoed through the territory. Other lions sensed the change in the air. For many, the Mapogo era was coming to an end, but Mr. T didn't see it that way. Now, he had only one mission, to avenge his brother's death. For a while he retreated, observed, and studied his enemy's movements. He knew that attacking without thinking was suicide. If he wanted a chance, he would need to choose the right moment. Even alone, Mr. T still inspired fear. He prowled the territory like a vengeful ghost, making his presence known. The Majingalan tried to surround him, but he always escaped at the last second. They knew that as long as he was alive, the threat of the Mapogo still existed, and that bothered them. A lone lion shouldn't be a problem. But Mr. T wasn't just any lion. The tension grew. The territory was divided. The other lions were confused. Who would rule the kingdom now? The Majingalani or the last surviving Mapogo? The war wasn't over, it was just changing phases, and Mr. T was determined to see this fight through to the end. But for that, he needed something he hadn't had for a long time: allies. And to everyone's surprise, he knew exactly where to find them. The African jungle doesn't forget, and neither does Mr. T. Kinky Tail's death wasn't the end. It was a call to vengeance. He could have disappeared, accepted defeat, and let the Majingalani take over the territory. But he wasn't that kind of lion. He was a Mapogo, forged in battles, molded by blood and instinct. And now, alone against an entire coalition, he was determined to rewrite his story. But he knew he couldn't fight alone forever. The Mapogo were never just individuals. They were a force when united. Knowing he couldn't face the Majingalan alone, Mr. T reunited with the remaining Mapogo, but the scene had changed. Now, they weren't conquerors, they were survivors fighting against a new power. Now he wasn't just a lion seeking vengeance, he was a leader with a purpose. Mr. T's return alongside his brothers brought a new fear to the jungle. The Majingalane were still powerful, but now they faced a threat they knew well. Their reign wasn't guaranteed. Mr. T didn't just want to get back what he'd lost, he wanted to make the Majingalani's lives a living hell. And that's exactly what he did. Even under pressure from the Majingalani, Mr. T didn't abandon the territory. He stood firm in protecting the Salala pride, ensuring that his lineage survived. But his fight wasn't to expand an empire, it was to avoid being erased from history. His every roar echoed through the territory, reminding everyone that the Mapogo still existed. But this also meant that the war wasn't over, the Majingalani wouldn't forget. And so began an era of attacks and counterattacks. Mr. T wouldn't rest. He was always patrolling, always prepared. Every day was a battle for survival. He knew that one day the final fight would come, and when that moment came, he would be ready. But as the conflict intensified, other eyes were watching. New predators were approaching, drawn by the chaos. The jungle is never without a king for long. Every legend has an end. And in the heart of the African jungle, Mr. T's final battle was about to begin. He survived wars, betrayals, and the largest rival coalition he had ever faced. But nature doesn't forgive weakness, and new predators had their eyes on his territory. The Mapogo's time was running out, and Mr. T, even though one of the greatest kings to ever walk this earth, was now alone again. The Salati, a coalition of 4 young and vigorous males, saw Mr. T as a king in decline. The cycle of the jungle is relentless. Old lions fall so new ones can rule. Like the Majingalani had done before, they attacked as a group, hunting Mr. T with patience and precision. But he didn't run. He would never run. For him, dying fighting was the only option. On the morning of March 16, 2012, the battle began. Alone against 4, Mr. T roared like never before. He fought until the last second, delivering brutal blows, biting, taking down opponents. But there were too many Salati. They surrounded him, immobilized his paws, and bit his spine. The roar of the lion that once dominated half of Sabi Sands was silenced forever. The jungle lost one of its greatest warriors. His body lay there on the Savanna floor as a warning to all. Nature has no favorites. Kings come and go. But legacies survive. And Mr. T's legacy will never be forgotten. He wasn't just a lion, he was a symbol of strength, dominance, and survival. The Salati now reigned, but they knew the truth. Even after his death, the impact of Mr. T and the Mapogo was undeniable. At their peak, they dominated half of Sabi Sands, controlled 8 prides, and influenced future generations of lions. His name is still remembered as one of the most feared in the savannah. But what if I told you that even after his death, Mr. T's influence still shaped the future of the jungle? More surprising. For years, Mr. T terrorized and ruled the African jungle with brutal force. He survived betrayals, bloody battles, and twists of fate that few lions could withstand. Even when he was alone, after Kinky Tail's death, he didn't back down. He kept fighting, resisting, clinging to what was left of his empire. But nature is unforgiving. In 2012, the Salati appeared and Mr. T met his final challenge. 4 against 1. A no-win battle. His roar still echoed before the final blow, his broken spine, his fallen body, but his legend intact. Until the very last moment, he was the predator who never accepted being the prey. Today, his name still echoes across the plains of Sabi Sands. Mapogo, Mr. T, the lion who knew no fear. Amidst the dust and blood, his story lives on, told by those who witnessed his reign. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for more stories of power, conflict, and domination in the wild. The jungle never sleeps, and the battles never end.